In 30 years of practice, there is one pattern I have seen so many times that it still bothers me more than I can comfortably explain. The men who arrived in crisis almost never arrived without warning. They did not wake up one morning perfectly healthy, and then, by some random twist of fate, end up in an emergency room bed with a stroke, a heart attack, failing kidneys, uncontrolled diabetes, or a liver already under more strain than anyone realized. They were warned. Not with pain, not with something dramatic enough to make them stop in the middle of a normal day, not with a symptom loud enough to overpower routine. They were warned with numbers, quiet numbers, ordinary numbers, numbers that had been drifting in the wrong direction for years, while life stayed busy enough to make ignoring them feel reasonable. That is the part that still gets to me, because most of the men who ended up in trouble were not betrayed by a body that gave them no signal. They were betrayed by never being taught what the signals were. I'm Dr. Adrian, and if you are a man over 45, I need you to hear me very clearly. Your body has likely been talking to you for years, maybe a decade. Not with chest pain, not with collapse, not with the kind of dramatic symptom that forces you to stop the car, sit on the edge of the bed, and admit something is seriously wrong. It has been talking to you with numbers. Quiet, measurable numbers. Numbers you can get from a basic blood draw, a home blood pressure monitor, and a pulse check that takes less than a minute. And today, I'm going to show you the 6 numbers that tell the real story of what is happening inside your body. I call them your body's dashboard. Every pilot checks the dashboard before takeoff. Every engineer watches the gauges before pushing a machine under load. Every serious operator knows one thing. If you don't watch the signals early, the breakdown feels sudden only because you missed the buildup. And yet most men over 45 go years, sometimes entire decades, without checking the 6 numbers that quietly tell the story of their heart, their kidneys, their arteries, their blood sugar, their liver, and the deeper metabolic direction their body is moving in. That has to change. And I need you to stay with me until the end, because there is one mistake that makes all 6 of these numbers almost useless even if you check them. One mistake, one habit, one pattern that destroys more good intentions than almost anything else in preventive medicine. I will tell you exactly what it is later. But first, I need to show you what is actually possible if you catch these numbers early. I have seen men in their 50s bring early prediabetes back toward normal before it hardened into disease. I have seen early kidney decline stabilize because someone finally caught it before the loss became devastating. I have seen blood pressure come down before it had more time to thicken the heart. I have seen liver enzymes normalize because a man finally understood what his body had been trying to say for years. Not because he got lucky, not because he had elite genetics, not because he found some internet miracle, because he checked the right numbers at the right time and acted while the story was still changeable. That is the word I want in your mind today. Changeable, because a lot of damage is silent, but a surprising amount of it is still changeable if you find it early enough. So let's begin. Number 1 on your dashboard, blood pressure. People call it the silent killer all the time. But most people never really stop to think about why that phrase is so brutally accurate. It is not silent in some poetic way. It is silent because your arteries do not come with an internal alarm for pressure. You do not feel 150/95 the way you feel a toothache. You do not feel 160/100 the way you feel a pulled back muscle. You wake up, you drink coffee, you answer messages, you go to work, you drive, you laugh, you function, and all the while, every single heartbeat is pressing more force into your arteries, your kidneys, and the delicate vessels in your brain than those structures were designed to tolerate year after year. Think of a hose under too much pressure, not for one afternoon, for years. The material stiffens, the weak spots worsen, the structure ages faster than it should. That is what your arteries do. They are supposed to be flexible. They are meant to expand and recoil. They are designed to cushion pressure, not live under too much of it all the time. But chronic high pressure slowly changes that system. And once it progresses far enough, you do not just have a blood pressure issue. You now have a body where the damage from high pressure is helping build the next problem. That is the part people miss. High blood pressure does not usually create one dramatic event from nowhere. It builds conditions. It stiffens arteries. It strains kidneys. It pushes the heart to pump against greater resistance. It thickens the left ventricle. It increases stroke risk. It accelerates vascular aging. And almost all of that can happen while you feel normal. I remember a man named Marcus, 58, construction manager, strong, reliable, the kind of man who took pride in never missing work. He came in for a routine insurance physical almost like it was a nuisance. His blood pressure was 162/98. He laughed, literally laughed, said he felt great, said it had to be stress, said he had no symptoms, and he meant every word of it. But his heart was telling a different story. Further testing showed early left ventricular hypertrophy. That means the main pumping chamber of his heart had already started adapting to years of elevated pressure. Not a bad week, not one stressful month, years. That is what makes high blood pressure so dangerous. It changes structure before it changes sensation. So what should you do? Buy a home monitor. Not someday. Soon. It does not need to be expensive. Check in the morning, before coffee, before food, before activity. Sit quietly for 5 minutes first. Take 2 readings 1 minute apart. Write them down. Not one reading once a month when you feel worried. A real pattern. Your target is around 120/80. If you are consistently above 135/85 at home, that is not something to casually postpone. That deserves a conversation with your doctor soon, because blood pressure is one of the most controllable major risk factors in medicine. And it is one of the most ignored simply because you do not feel it rising. Now number 2 on your dashboard, resting heart rate. This one surprises people every time, because almost nobody grows up being taught that resting heart rate is an important health metric. They know weight matters, maybe cholesterol, maybe blood sugar if diabetes runs in the family. But resting heart rate? Most men never think about it at all. That is a mistake, because your resting heart rate is one of the simplest ways to see how hard your cardiovascular system is working before your day even begins. A healthy resting heart rate often falls somewhere between 50 and 70 beats per minute. Athletes sometimes go lower. But when I see a man consistently sitting in the 80s, upper 80s, or 90s, I pay attention, because that heart is doing more work than it should while the body is at rest. And over time, that matters enormously. Here is the math that changes people's faces when I explain it. If your resting heart rate is 90 instead of 60, that is roughly 43,000 extra beats every single day. Every day. That becomes more than 15 million extra beats every year. Not because you were training hard, not because you ran a marathon, because your baseline is running too hot. That can reflect poor fitness, poor sleep, chronic stress, dehydration, thyroid dysfunction, metabolic strain, too much stimulation, early cardiovascular trouble, sometimes several at once. And again, most men do not experience this as a dramatic red flag. They experience it as, I'm just more tired than I used to be. Or, I guess this is what getting older feels like. Or, I need coffee to get moving. I remember a man in his early 50s who told me he thought feeling tired and keyed up at the same time was just part of middle age. He checked his resting heart rate on a few mornings, then a few more. High 80s, low 90s, repeatedly. That one number forced a conversation he had avoided for years. He was sleeping badly, carrying too much abdominal weight, doing almost no deliberate exercise, living in a chronically stimulated state, and his body had been broadcasting that every single morning through a number he had never once thought to check. So what should you do? Check your resting heart rate first thing in the morning before getting out of bed. If you have a smartwatch, the data may already be there. If not, measure your pulse at the wrist for 30 seconds and double it. Do this for 5 mornings. Take the average. If it is consistently over 80, write it down and bring it up. If it is over 90 most mornings, I would not brush that off. And here's the hopeful part. This is one of the most responsive numbers on the dashboard. Better sleep, more walking, less chronic stimulation, better hydration, weight loss if needed, less alcohol late at night. Even a few weeks of consistent change can move this number meaningfully. That is why I love it as a metric. It tells you whether your body is moving toward resilience or away from it. Now number 3, eGFR, estimated glomerular filtration rate. This may be the most critically underappreciated number in this entire video, because it tells you how well your kidneys are filtering your blood. And most men do not think about their kidneys at all until something has already gone far enough to scare them. That is a mistake, because your kidneys can lose a shocking amount of function before you feel anything clearly. 40%, 50%. Even more. By the time you have swelling, marked fatigue, clear urinary changes, or symptoms obvious enough to frighten you, a lot of damage may already be done. That is not exaggeration. That is basic kidney medicine. Your kidneys are built with tremendous reserve. They compensate. They adapt. They keep going. That sounds like a blessing, and it is, until you realize it also allows damage to stay hidden for years. Your kidneys contain millions of tiny filtering units called nephrons. When some are damaged by high blood pressure, high blood sugar, chronic inflammation, or years of medication stress, the remaining nephrons work harder. That compensation hides the decline. So a man can feel fine while kidney reserve quietly disappears. I have seen men come in for something unrelated and discover that their kidney function was already far below where anyone would want it, and they had no clue. One man came in because of fatigue he blamed on work. His eGFR came back around 30. He had already lost an enormous amount of filtering capacity. No dramatic warning, no pain, no obvious crisis, just years of silence. That is why blood pressure matters. That is why HbA1c matters. That is why regular heavy use of anti-inflammatory painkillers can matter. The kidneys often pay the price quietly. So what do? Ask for kidney function testing with your blood work. That means creatinine and the calculated eGFR. Your target is above 60, and ideally much closer to 90 or above depending on age and context. If you are drifting into the 45 to 60 range, that deserves monitoring and explanation. If it is below 45, that deserves serious follow-up. And the good news is that kidney stress caught early, especially when driven by blood pressure or sugar, can often be slowed or stabilized. But once significant structural loss has occurred, you are no longer preventing damage. You are managing it. That is a very different conversation. Now number 4, triglycerides and LDL cholesterol. I'm grouping them together because men hear the word cholesterol constantly, but almost no one explains the real story properly. Total cholesterol by itself is not enough. LDL matters, triglycerides matter, and how those numbers move together matters. LDL particles are one of the main carriers involved in plaque formation. They drift into artery walls. They trigger inflammation. The immune system reacts. Foam cells form. Plaque develops. And it all happens quietly. That process can be going on for years in a man who feels completely healthy. That is why elevated LDL is dangerous. Not because it hurts today, because it changes what tomorrow looks like. Now, triglycerides tell you something different but equally important. They often reveal how metabolically overloaded the system is. Too much sugar, too much refined starch, too much alcohol, too much liver fat, too much insulin resistance. When triglycerides are high, I do not just think about lipids. I think about the liver, the pancreas, the way the body is handling fuel, and many men are shocked when they learn that their triglycerides are not primarily a fat problem. They are often a sugar processing problem. The liver takes excess sugar and turns it into fat. That fat travels as triglycerides. That is why I have seen triglycerides fall dramatically when men cut sugary drinks, stopped late-night snacking, and reduced refined carbs. No miracle, just biology. LDL is more stubborn, more structural. If LDL is elevated, especially with other risk factors, that deserves serious attention, because LDL does not feel like anything while it is building risk. A man can feel normal for years while plaque quietly develops. And when a plaque finally ruptures, that is when the emergency happens. Not because something new appeared that day, because something had been building for years. So get a fasting lipid panel. Fast 9 to 12 hours beforehand for the cleanest result. Triglycerides above 150 deserve attention. LDL above 100 deserves a meaningful discussion depending on your risk profile. And if those numbers are high, do not ask only, do I need medicine? Ask, what pattern is driving this? That is the more useful question. Now number 5, HbA1c. This may be the most revealing number on the entire dashboard, and too many men still are not getting it. A fasting glucose tells you what your blood sugar is doing one morning. That has value. But HbA1c tells you what your blood sugar has been doing over the last 2 to 3 months. That is a much deeper level of honesty. It measures how much of your hemoglobin has been exposed to glucose over time. That means it reflects your real pattern. Not one good morning, not one careful dinner, not one lucky blood draw. Your actual life. And what that often reveals is disturbing. Because many men have been living in prediabetes for years without knowing it. No clear warning, no dramatic symptom, just more fatigue, more belly fat, more thirst, more fog, more post-meal sleepiness. Things that get filed under aging all the time. Meanwhile, the blood vessels are paying. The nerves are paying. The kidneys are paying. This is one of the most important truths I can tell you. Prediabetes is not harmless waiting room disease. It is active metabolic damage already underway. I have seen men who looked not too unhealthy from the outside come back with HbA1c values in the pre-diabetic or diabetic range and be genuinely stunned. They thought diabetes had a look. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes it looks like a man who is just a little tired, a little heavier than he used to be, and a little too dependent on snacks to get through the day. So ask for HbA1c specifically. Below 5.7% is the target. Between 5.7 and 6.4 is prediabetes. 6.5 and above is diabetes. And this is one of the numbers I have seen improve dramatically when men make the right changes early. Less sugar, less refined starch, more walking, especially after meals, better sleep, more muscle activity, less abdominal fat. Those changes show up here. That is why HbA1c matters. It is honest in a way many tests are not. Now number 6, ALT and AST, your liver enzymes. This is the number almost no one expects to see on a body dashboard, and that is exactly why it belongs here. Because your liver is not a background organ doing vague cleanup work. It is metabolic headquarters. It regulates blood sugar between meals, helps manage fats, processes hormones, handles toxins and medications. And when the liver becomes inflamed or fills with fat, the consequences spread far beyond the liver itself. ALT and AST are enzymes that leak into the bloodstream when liver cells are stressed or damaged. And one of the most common problems we catch this way in men over 45 is fatty liver disease. Now here is the dangerous part. Fatty liver often causes no symptoms early on. No dramatic pain, no obvious distress, no warning loud enough to stop daily life. Just quiet underperformance while the system gets more inflamed, less efficient, and harder to stabilize. The same man with rising triglycerides, creeping blood sugar, increasing waist size, more fatigue, and more brain fog may also have liver enzymes drifting upward. But because no one connected the dots, the whole pattern gets missed. I have seen men blame aging for symptoms that were really the downstream effects of metabolic overload, with the liver sitting right at the center of the story. That is why ALT and AST belong on this dashboard, because if the liver is struggling, the whole metabolic conversation becomes harder. So ask for liver enzymes with your annual blood work. In many labs, normal is under 40, though ranges vary. If they are elevated, do not panic. But do take it seriously, because fatty liver caught early is often one of the most reversible conditions in medicine. That is real good news. Now I need to tell you the mistake that makes all 6 of these numbers nearly meaningless even if you know them. The mistake is this: you never actually check them. That is it. That is the mistake. Men watch something like this. They feel motivated, maybe even shaken up a little. They mean to schedule the blood work. They mean to buy the home monitor. They mean to look at the resting heart rate on the watch they already wear. Then life gets busy. This week becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. And the numbers stay unknown. I want to say this as clearly as I can. Knowing these metrics exist does not protect you. Intending to get them checked does not protect you. The actual test protects you. The actual number on the actual page. The actual reading from the actual machine. The actual conversation with your doctor. That is what changes outcomes. I have seen men who could talk about health all day long still get blindsided by preventable disease because they never translated information into action. Information without action is just entertainment. So here is exactly what I want you to do before this week is over. First, schedule blood work, a comprehensive metabolic panel, a lipid panel, an HbA1c, 1 appointment, 1 blood draw. That gives you 5 of the 6 numbers. Second, buy a home blood pressure monitor and use it 7 mornings in a row, before coffee, after sitting quietly for 5 minutes. Write the readings down. Third, check your resting heart rate over the last week. If you have a smartwatch, it may already be there. If you don't, measure it manually for several mornings. Fourth, tell someone you are doing this. Your wife, your brother, a close friend, your doctor. Say it out loud, because once a plan becomes real enough to say, it becomes much harder to postpone. And let me leave you with this. If the check engine light came on in your car, you would not wait until the engine seized before taking it seriously. That would be irrational. But your body often does not even give you a check engine light in the form of symptoms. The dashboard I have given you today is the closest thing you have. 6 numbers, a simple blood draw, a home monitor, a pulse count. That is the dashboard. That is the warning system. And the distance between where you are right now and where a true health crisis begins is often years, sometimes a decade. That gap is your opportunity. Inside that gap, the interventions are often straightforward. Walk more, sleep better, reduce added sugar, treat the pressure, lose weight if needed, change direction while change is still simple. Because once the crisis arrives, modern medicine gets very good at rescue. But the years before the crisis, that is where you save yourself. Know your numbers. Track them every year. Watch the direction, not just whether they fall in range on one lucky day. And if any of them begin drifting the wrong way, treat that as the signal it is. Act while acting is still simple. That is what men who do well long-term almost always have in common. Not perfect genetics, not perfect discipline, better timing. They paid attention early. They checked the dashboard before the engine started smoking. And because they did, the future stayed changeable. You have the 6 numbers now. Use them.